I just wanted to do a really quick discussion about vaccines. Vaccines are not my specialty in any way, shape, or form. I take my information from the experts. Every week here at my hospital, they do a very in-depth review of the numbers of COVID and the science behind the vaccines. The funny thing is that online I see people saying, I don't want the vaccine, I'm not going to get the vaccine. Meanwhile, at our hospital, it's all about who could get the vaccine first, and everybody's competing, and I want the vaccine before you get it. And these are extremely intelligent doctors, and so that should tell you something. But I think what I see in the public that is the issue is a lack of understanding about risk. Everything we do in medicine has risk. Every time I go and operate, I'm about to go and do surgeries, I'm putting those patients at serious risk when I do the surgery. The idea is that I'm doing that risk with the hope of a benefit. And every time I talk to patients about doing a surgery, we talk about risk versus benefit ratio. That applies in vaccines too. The difference is when I'm doing surgery, it's typically the situation where the person actually has a disease process or something that I'm going to fix. With vaccines, it's preventing something so they don't have it yet. That makes it a little bit harder to understand. And really, vaccines are a issue where the risk is a national risk, not as much an individual risk. Obviously, it is an individual risk, but not as much. These are public health issues. I think probably the first thing we ought to talk about is the fact that the idea that doctors are getting paid to give vaccines, that Bill Gates is paying us, is just, stop and think for a second how absolutely ridiculous that is. I know a lot of doctors, and doctors are concerned about the health of our patients. The people that I know in public health, especially people like Fauci and in that situation, are deeply concerned about individuals and about the health of a country. This is not about money. In fact, these drug companies Pfizer makes a lot more money out of erection pills than they do out of vaccines. This is not about money. This is about public health. And from a doctor standpoint, a pediatrician does not want to see a kid get sick from a vaccine. It's absolutely absurd that anybody would think that a pediatrician would take money knowing that they were hurting a kid. Absurd. Absurd. It would never happen. And in fact, every pediatrician I know vaccinates their own kids, and I vaccinate mine. And that's based on reviewing science. You got to believe that when I had my children, I was actually nervous as hell about vaccinating them. And I did a lot of research, and I probably made our pediatrician crazy with my review of the research, and then I decided to fully vaccinate my children and vaccinate myself. I get my flu shot every year, even though I do think the flu shot is the least effective. I still get it every year. Part of the distrust, I think, comes from a few things that the government did in order to actually protect people. And that is the National Vaccine Compensation Program. People look at what's called the VAERS, which is a national reporting system for vaccine injury, and they put it online as, look, there's all these vaccine injuries, and they got to understand that reporting system is made so that we could pick up if there really is a problem. We will pick it up. Health and Human Services watches this very closely, and basically anybody could do that report. Like you could call them up and report a vaccine injury, and it may not be a vaccine injury at all. This is a very wide-based report so that we could look at all these reports and see if there's a trend towards an actual problem that we then need to go and investigate, because the FDA and the Health and Human Services is very concerned, and the CDC is very concerned with whether or not if a vaccine is causing a problem, that we jump on top of it right away. But of course, there has been compensation for injury. And there was a program that was started in the 80s, and what had happened is in the 70s, there had been, we used to give the polio vaccine, which was a oral polio vaccine, which was actually an attenuated virus, and a kid actually got polio from it. And that turned into a very large lawsuit and started a very, as you know, we're a very litigious society, and there were lots of lawsuits. And pertussis, the DPT vaccine, specifically the pertussis part of that, there was a suggestion that possibly it could cause encephalopathy. Now, this was studied extensively, and it was felt that it did not cause encephalopathy, and there were multiple experts that had done the studies, but there were multiple lawsuits. And the problem with the lawsuits is that despite expert testimony, having an injured child played to the jury, and some huge settlements, millions and millions of dollars of settlements were made. And the drug companies were like, we're not going to do any more DPT. And again, I emphasize the drug companies make a lot more money from drugs than they do vaccines. So here they were going through this very litigious idea of vaccines and injuries. And you got to understand, for an expert witness, it's really hard to prove the vaccine didn't cause the injury. I mean, it's to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt the vaccine didn't cause it in a single case. I could show you studies, for instance, with autism, that there are, so many studies now that show that autism does not cause that vaccines don't cause autism. But if you're in a court case with one single person and they got autism, and the parents are telling you about the issue, it's a hard case to fight. And so the drug companies were like, we're out of the vaccine business. We're not going to do research and development. We're not going to produce DPT anymore. And of course, this would potentially cause a huge health problem in the country. And so Health and Human Services worked with Congress. A law was passed to develop a compensation program. The idea behind the compensation program actually was to basically give out compensation very easily, to make it very easy for someone to get